Hi, everybody. I thought I would take a few minutes to talk about one of the machines you don't hear us talk about very often, which is our CNC machine. I'm going to show some small clips of it in action and talk a bit about what it is and what it does for us. So let's start by, what does CNC stand for? It stands for Computer Numeric Control. And I think that tips you off a bit about what this machine does. Essentially, it's a machine that's connected to a small computer. We use a designated software to provide direction to the machine, and in turn, it controls a router that is attached to it. So right now, we've input a design, we've laid out the job and told the machine what the width of the board is, how deep we want it to cut, and what we want it to cut. And right now, you can see the router is in fact cutting out a small pattern for us. So we mostly use this small CNC to do engravings or carvings on live edge wood. We usually fill those in with epoxy. So any of our epoxy signs or wall art that you've seen are usually actually carved out on our CNC first, and then we fill those shallows with, or sorry, not shallows, hollows with epoxy. So just showing a close up here, it's carving what I think is a small flower right now. We've put a 16-inch bit on it, so it is doing a little bit more fine detail in there as well. There are much finer bits you can use for much finer details, but because this is a fairly simple design, we don't need those specific bits. So this is not how all CNCs operate. In fact, we use a much larger scale version of the same machine to flatten all of our boards and tables when they're complete. So it's an industrial CNC with a very large bed where we would put a completed table, and we would program the machine to take small amounts off of the surface in order to flatten the board to a certain thickness. And so it's the same principle, but a different purpose that we use that machine for. This one we use for mostly more intricate work. And though we have mostly used this machine for signs with epoxy in them, it can do three-dimensional carvings, it can carve metal, it can carve plastic, and we haven't really played around with those things, mostly due to the fact that we didn't actually have the space for our CNC at our former location. Only with the new shop we've been able to use it. So this is being used to create a sign for our new niece Logan, which we will fill with epoxy, but we could just leave carved out. And I'll show some pictures here. So here it is as it's just being finished. And you can see there's some small hairs, I guess. So we took a sander to it and cleaned up those edges, which I'll show you right here. Now we could just leave it carved out like that, but we decided to fill it with epoxy. And so that's after sanding. And then we applied a nice satin finish to it. And there's the finished product. So that's a little look at our small CNC and the type of things we do with it. So comment below on what you would like me to show you next.